So just a quick blurb about me. Those of you who don't know me or have not heard me over the last couple of years, I've got over 35 years of experience in AutoCAD across multiple industry segments. I'm currently a senior support specialist. I've taught AutoCAD as a certified instructor. I've had 15 plus years in CAD management, 8 plus years in cruise ship building, 5 years support for civil, survey, and landscape architecture before that. And I've worked pretty much in every field, mechanical design, electromechanical, printed circuit board and schematic, architectural, acoustic, and equipment layouts in industrial spaces. I have a bachelor's in business management and a master's in organizational management. So today, here's what we're going to cover. We're going to start with the 3 things that we want to cover first, which is number 1 is the lasso and fence functions. We're going to talk about controlling point sizes and styles. The controlling point sizes in the lasso and fence were from last webinar that I did, where some people were asking some questions on how to do that. And the last one, I'm going to cover some polyline grip editing, basically what the specific grips do, just so everyone knows what we can do. And after we cover those few items, then we're going to go into a live Q&A where I will do my best to answer any AutoCAD LT questions you may have. I'll try and answer in the order they appear in our questions and answer box. And if you have questions during the presentation, please ask them, but hold off until the Q&A section for any questions not pertaining to the 3 items that we're covering first. And if I cannot answer a question or it would consume too much time to go through, we want to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to, get their things heard. And if we do not get to everyone, we do value your input greatly, and we will make sure to include any topics that did not get answered in a future webinar. All right, so the first thing we're going to talk about today, we're going to talk about the lasso. To create a lasso selection, you left mouse click and hold, drag the mouse around and release the mouse button. This can be done at any time. When using lasso selection, you can press the space bar to cycle between either window, crossing, and fence object selection modes. And the lasso is very similar to other editing type programs. So if you've ever used Photoshop with a lasso or any of those type of photo editing, things like that, lasso works very similar to those. And it allows for a freeform selection without having to click multiple points. Those of you that have always used crossing polygon or window polygon, you have to click at least 2 points. Okay, and I see someone can only see a blank screen. Everyone else can see my screen except for that user. All right, so we'll talk about that. And then fence, to create a fence selection, you must be in an editing or selection command. So generally anything in the modify panel of the home ribbon. Then it's a simple left mouse click on each point you want to include in the fence selection. It selects all objects that cross a fence, the selection fence, and the fence method is like the fence method is like a crossing polygon, except that the fence is not closed and a fence can cross itself in multiple places. So we're going to go quickly into the lasso and fence demonstration right here. Let's come here. So the first thing we're going to do, I'm going to go into my options to show you. Right, in my options under selection, you're going to see that I have allow press and drag for lasso checked. Okay, if this is checked, then here's the behavior. I'm going to click and hold my left mouse button, and I'm simply going to drag it, and this creates that lasso. So this is that freeform shape, right? And you'll see I can do this. If I hit the space bar, it changes it from a crossing, which is the green, to now just a window, so only things contained in the window selection. And if I hit the space bar one more time, it goes into the fence command, where only things that cross that fence line get selected. Notice it ignored everything here because I didn't touch anything here. So that's lasso in a nutshell, right? I personally don't use it very often simply because I'm a old school 2-click kind of guy, but we can definitely use lasso. I have used lasso on occasion. So now we're going to talk about the other thing. So if I want to move and it says selection objects here, I can right mouse click, so trim, we'll try with trim. We'll click this boundary right here. When I right mouse click here, you're going to see that I have the option to pick a fence. And that's just 2 lines right here. I can come back across itself multiple times like that. That's just a simple fence selection. Everything that I click that crosses that boundary gets selected and trimmed. Because this was my boundary, I didn't have any boundaries down here. And because I crossed this, it automatically erased that as well. So those are really the two functions that I really like to show off. I use fence quite often, especially if I'm trimming something, right? I'll go trim, I'll select this, right? And I usually hit F for fence and just draw my line this way, and then I'm done. Okay, so that's fence in a nutshell. And that's lasso in a nutshell. Again, start my lasso command. This is crossing, again, because it's got a dashed border and it's green. If I hit the space bar, it becomes a solid border in blue, so it's only a window selection. And if I hit space bar one more time, now it's a fence selection, right? And I can do pretty much anything I want with a fence, and you'll see I didn't select anything because that fence line did not cross anything, right? Any questions on lasso and fence? All right, we'll move on then. Controlling point sizes and styles. So points are objects that act as nodes, which you can snap objects to. You can specify 2 and 3D locations for a point. The current elevation, which is the current Z elevation plane, is used for the Z elevation of the point when you put it in. You can create points using the point command or by clicking on the Home tab, expanding out the draw panel and selecting points. That's that little monster right here. And you can use measure divide to create points along an object without breaking that object. Points are only recognized by the node and the nearest O snaps. Okay, once created, you may not see them or be aware of their existence, so we need to change how the points are displayed. By default, the points are turned off so you can't see them. And that's drawing specific, so we may need to go in and change that in the drawing. So in the Home tab, you'll find the Utilities panel, expand it out. There you will find the point style box right here, or the point style selection. You can also type in P-type and get the same dialog box. In this dialog box, there are 3 sections. The top section determines what the points look like on the screen. Notice there are 20 styles to choose from, and there's no place to customize it. What you see is what you get. Those are the things that you can choose from. The middle section here controls the point size. This will be 5% or in size in absolute units or size relative to the screen. Because I have the radio button and the bottom section says size relative to the screen, the points will be 5% of my screen size, no matter what my zoom level is. The bottom section determines if it's fixed. So if I set this as a set size in absolute units, what it will do is that whatever I specify here for the point size will be absolute units in the drawing, no matter what my zoom level. And just as a bonus item here, this is AutoCAD only, not LT. I've run into this a few times. OSNAP Z. Type in OSNAP Z and controls whether object snaps are automatically projected onto a plane parallel to the XY of the current UCS, or it's used at the current elevation. By default, OSNAP Z is set to 0. So if you are snapping between 2 points at different elevations, it will draw the line between those 2 different elevations. If you set that to 1, it will snap to those points, but it will not include the Z elevation and will draw the object at the Z elevation of your current Z plane, which you can set by the command ELEV or elevation. So we're going to go in here to point size. All right, so let's go into points right here. All right, so you're going to see I have a couple of polylines here, things like that, and I've got some other stuff in here. But if I check my Q select, right, you'll see that I have points in the drawing. So now we need to go turn those on. So again, we come up to our utilities, we go to point style. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn these to circles with X's. And I'm going to set my point size to 5%. Okay, there's my points right here that I've already created in the drawing. And you'll see I come in here and I regen and they change size because this is relative to the screen. Right, as I zoom out, they get bigger and bigger. As I zoom in and regen, they get smaller and smaller. If I go back here and change the point style to set size in absolute units, I'm going to set these to 5 units. No matter what my zoom scale is, it will automatically be set to 5 units in size. And those are a little big, so I'm going to set these down to 2 units in size. Okay, so a couple of things we're going to talk about points, right? I talked about measure and divide. So we come over here and we want to measure. And I usually type those things in, right? Right, we measure. We're going to select the object to measure. And I'm going to specify the length of each segment. I want each segment to be 2, and you'll see that's where my points end up. Now notice it did not break the polyline here. And let's actually go back to point style. Those are kind of still big, so I'm going to set those to 1. Right, it did not break this line, but it created those nodes along here. That's measure. Right, so you'll see here that the last piece from the endpoint here to there, etc. The other thing is divide. Right, we type in divide, we select this, and we want to divide this into 5 segments. These would be 5 arc length segments, so whatever the distance would be along the arc is where it put those points in. It creates 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 segments. It only creates 4 points. It doesn't create one at the beginning or the end. A couple other things that I want to talk to you about with that OSNAP Z. So if I measure, right, if I do a quick measure between, if I want to measure the distance between this node and this node, you're going to see that it says that it's 11.3137. And you'll see that's my distance. Now this is OSNAP Z set to 0. So if I go OSNAP Z and I set this to 1, and now I go back and measure distance, you go from here to here, and you're going to see that the actual value is 8. So they are 8 units across in the XY direction, and it's 11.3137 units in the X, Y, and Z direction, because this point here is at an elevation of 8, where this point is at an elevation of 0. So if you know that your linear distance from here to here should be something and it's not the correct distance when you measure, double check and see if you have 2 different Z elevations. And if that's a problem, make sure you set OSNAP Z to 1. Any other questions with points? Pretty easy to understand. And if you ever get into a drawing that has the points turned on and you want to turn them off again, you just come back here to point style and you select this one right here. And look, all the points are gone and they're not even grippable. I mean, they are truly gone from the drawing. All right, so now we're going to talk about polyline grip editing. This is another one that comes up very often, is when you select a polyline with no commands running, it will highlight and show the grips of the polyline. That's provided that if the grips are set to display, which is a grip system variable of 2. There are 2 grips to be aware of. You have a square grip at each of the vertices, and you have a rectangular grip at each of the segment midpoints. So what these control, each grip has its own set of functions as well as common functions. So when you hover on the square grip, these are the available functions, assuming that the grip multifunctional is equal to 3, which is the default. So unless you've changed these defaults, these are the things that you should get. You'll see that I can stretch, add, or remove a vertex. And when you hover on the rectangle grip, you'll see I can stretch, add, or convert to arc, or convert to line, depending on what we are selecting. So if you are on a line segment between 2 vertices, you get the convert to arc. If you are on an arc segment, will the points be printing? Okay, that's a good one, Robert. Yes, if the points are turned on and visible on your screen, they will print. And if you are on an arc segment here in the polyline grip editing and you click on it, you can convert that to a line that will take that arc and turn it into a line between those 2 segments, or between the 2 vertices. So the polyline grip editing, there's a couple of things. Stretch allows you to move the vertex, polyline segment, or arc radius. Add vertex allows you to place a new vertex for the polyline. The new vertex will be between the currently selected grip and the next vertex in the direction that the polyline was drawn. Can you purge the layers the points are on after turning points off? No, you cannot. All right, we'll back up here real quick. Let's go back to points. Okay, the points are in the drawing. If you have points on a point layer, that because those are AutoCAD objects, you cannot purge a point layer. If you want to get rid of the points in the drawing, your best bet, Q select all my points, select the operator to select all, hit OK. You'll see that those are all the points. I can hit delete at this point or erase. I can erase all the points in my drawing, and then I can turn around and purge the layer that they are on. If you select a line that has points on them and the points are turned off and moved, do they move? Do the points move? No, the points are completely independent of the object. So it's no different than if I drew a line parallel to this line right here. If I move this line or change this line that I would draw, so right here, right? I'm gonna draw a line from here to here, right? So if I move this line right here, my other line doesn't move, and you'll see if I go turn my points back on, they do not. These points are not associated with the objects. These are separate AutoCAD entities. So to select the points, they need to be turned on. Okay, if you turn the points on, you can select them individually this way, yes. If you simply want to get rid of the points, you can use Q select, the Q select command, and we will talk about, there's a resource center that we have on our IMAGINiT. Can you have two different style of points in the same drawing? No, you are only allowed to have one point style for the entire drawing. A lot of good questions with points, guys. Thank you. So if I want to select an individual point, I can do this. Our resource center, I believe it was 2 or 3 webinars ago where I went over Q select. For those of you that didn't see that, or I went through it pretty fast, Q select right here, since I've already covered this in a previous webinar. Basically, you can apply it to a current drawing. You can apply it to a selection set here. Change the object type. So I have lines, points, 2D polylines, and regular polylines in this particular drawing. I can go point. I can say properties. So I could actually say I want to select all points whose position Z is not equal to Z of 0. And you'll see that it grabs just the one point that I had at elevation 8. All right, let's get back here. All right, so the new vertex will be between the currently selected grip and the next vertex direction in the direction that the polyline was drawn. Remove vertex removes the currently selected vertex. Now, if you remove a vertex that has an arc either before or after it, it will remove the arc data before and or after. That's important to know. So if you have an arc and a line and a vertex and another arc, if you remove that vertex, it will take that arc and turn it back into a straight line. So you will have to go back and convert it to arc. Right, converts a line segment between two vertices into an arc, and convert to line converts the arc segment into a line segment. So now we're going to talk about polyline grip editing. I love polyline grips. So a couple of things here. All right, so here's our square. You'll see that I have my stretch vertex, so I can actually just stretch it. Right, I can add an additional vertex, which means it will add a vertex in between where I started and the next point it was drawn, and then I can come back here and stretch. Right, you can do some really crazy things. I apparently have my ortho on, so that's causing me some grief. I can come in here and you'll see I can stretch it and change it. So all I'm doing right here is changing the radius, and as I change the radius, you'll see the value update for what the radius is, and it changes where the center line is, or the center point of that circle. I can come back into this one here. I can convert that back to a line, so it changes that arc out here. I can come in here and I can convert this to an arc. Now, one of the things I want to show you, and this is one of the key things that I run across with people doing polylines. I have a polyline here that is a single segment that has this and an end vertex that has this. This middle vertex, you'll see, does not pop up a dialog box. You will also see that I have 3 dimension values in here. I have my 232, my 255, and then you'll see that there's a value of 0. What this means is that at this exact point, there are 2 vertices right on top of each other. So if you are ever in a situation where you're clicking on a polyline and you cannot get this dialog box to pop up, most likely you have duplicate vertices here. In order to clear that, now you would have to come in here and you would have to do a polyline edit polyline, right? And we want to edit vertex, and we go next, right? Because you'll see that there's, well, right, there's a little X showing the first vertex. I click next, it'll take me to the second one. I click next, it leaves me at the same place because there's 2 vertices on top of each other. And this is where I could move. And then I can hit exit. And then I can hit exit one more time. And now those 2 points now show up with the box. Something to be aware of when you are doing polylines and you are playing around with grips. If that box does not come up, you have vertices on top of each other. And I see this a lot because people get click happy sometimes. So just be aware of that. Any questions on that? All right. Well, we've covered all the things that I wanted to cover, and now we're ready to do some Q&A. This is your opportunity to ask me anything you want about AutoCAD, and I'll see what I can do to answer that. So to submit a question, have you done a session on Paperspace already? I have not done a recent, I don't think I've actually done a session on Paperspace specifically. So that's an in-depth one. Jacqueline. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a note of that, and we are going to include that in a future webinar. Okay, so submit a question, come over here to the questions panel, write down in here, put in the red box. All right. Future webinar on working with point clouds. Ooh. All right, I'd like to see layer states tutorial. Wow, keep them coming. All right, so when I use grips to change a revision cloud shape, sometimes it also changes the arc length. So Stephen, my question really primarily is going to come back to one thing is, are you on 2021 or are you on 2020 or an earlier version? So the reason why I'm asking that question is when we're drawing a revision cloud now, and all right, we select our first point here. Right, that's that way. There's a rectangular one now that's been included, and I did cover that previously. There it is, rectangular revision cloud. If I go from here to here, okay, you'll see that when I change the grips, the arc lengths may or may not update, and you actually have to set that. Okay, can you talk about viz retain, xrefs, and layer states? All right, include a session on sheet set manager. That was actually covered in, what was it? Was that January or was that the November one? That's going to be in our...
I can check.
Okay. Let's see, can I get a copy of this webinar? Yes, I will make this PDF available. I will basically be creating this PDF, and I will make the PDF of my slides available to you. And then there is also on our resource center, we will get this posted shortly after it's done, so you can go back and review this at any time. All right, so is there any way to get set layers to print one color and display a different color? All right, hang on. Let's see, the grip change for bed. So yes, let's go back to Steven. So when we go talk about revision cloud right here, you'll see that you have an arc length right down here. You'll notice that my specify the approximate length of the arc. This is where you want to hard code like 10. And one of the things that you will also want to look at here is that you've got a freehand here. Just make sure that you've got your arc length set to a specific one. All right. There's some arc length variables in here. There's an arc min and an arc max that we need to go through and actually modify. And I'm trying to remember where that is. There's an arc length that is set with the revision clouds here. Let's see. Yep. Maximum arc length is 127, minimum arc length is 63. So this is where we want to change the arc length, and we want to change that to just 10. Now, if I'm drawing a freehand, you will see here that it tries to accomplish that, and it will actually make those changes. There is a place in the settings where you can set arc length min and arc length max so that that arc length will never change. Let's see, future webinar, working with point clouds, layer states tutorial. Yep, you're working with 2018, so you do not have the rectangular one that was now included in 2021, where you are dealing with these type of revision clouds that when you create them, you have multiple arc segments, just like Polyline grip editing, basically. It's a complex Polyline grip. Let's see, is there a way to set layers to print one color and display a different color? So yes, there is. Now, if you, let's say for example, I have these all displaying this way, right? If I go into my plot dialog and I go into my plot style here, right? And I can modify my plot style. So right now, anything that's set as color 7 here, it's saying use object color. I could actually set this to print red. Right, I'll just save and close this real quick. And you'll see once I do a preview, you'll see that my objects will print red, and you will see that the points show up because there are points in this drawing. But you'll see that everything here is actually white. So that's how you would control that. The other place you can control that, now this is color-based plotting, which uses CTBs. The other place that you can change that is that if you're using STBs or style-based plotting, when you go into your layer properties here, you can assign, well, I'm actually in a color-based drawing, so let me open up a style-based drawing. All right, we're gonna open up a, all right, we're going named plot styles. All right, so the difference here is when I go to my plot, you're gonna see now I'm using STBs or style-based. So when I go into my layer properties here, you're gonna now see that I have a plot style set to normal, and I'll have different plot styles that I assign in my STB. So based on the layer, it will print a certain methodology. So what that means here is if we go back to our plot dialog, right, if I just go here to Autodesk Mono, and I edit my mono, you're gonna see in here that I have normal, which is set to use this. I have a solid, etc., 20%, 30% screen, 70% screen. If I change one of these to, for example, to red, right? So I've changed that to red, and then I change our plot style here to 60% screen. Anything that's on layer 0, regardless of the layer that it's on here, when I plot this, All right, let's go window. Oh, I don't have any geometry, that would be why. All right, let's put in rectangle, let's put a line. All right, now when I go to plot this, now maybe we can see some magic. See, they show up as red because that's set in the plot style. So your plot styles control whether or not you're using color-based or style-based. Your plot styles control what your output is, regardless of what you have on your screen. Okay. So viz retain, xrefs, and layer states. SSM, copy the webinar. Viz retain 1 or 2 when working with xref layer states. Embedded spreadsheets, Excel. So XREFs and layer states, we are going to have to put that one on a separate webinar because that by itself is a fairly large example and set. So Salmi, I do apologize. We will not be able to cover that today, but we will get you covered in a future webinar. So we'll get back to that. Shannon, have you done embedded spreadsheets in Excel? So my question is going to ask, are you copying and pasting as an OLE object, or are you using the data connection wizard to actually open up the spreadsheet, bring it into AutoCAD as a data link, so that if you modify the spreadsheet, regardless of whether or not AutoCAD is open, next time you open up AutoCAD, that spreadsheet automatically updates? That's going to be the question. So I will wait for her. All right, is there a way to make the entire drawing coplanar, i.e. how some items are drawn at different elevation and properties and I can't set to Z to 0? Okay, so there's a couple of ways to do that. If you are using full AutoCAD, you have an express tool up here. You have an express tool called flatten. Okay, there should be flatten objects. This is usually the first thing that I would try, is to flatten objects. You select everything. What it will do is it will flatten everything down to an elevation of Z equals 0 wherever possible. There are situations where it cannot. I actually wrote a separate Lisp routine because I've run into this before where I have needed to go through and really blow stuff away, and that one does work. And it is, however, if you're not careful, it has a tendency to blow up drawings. So I don't usually give that one out to people because I really want to make sure that I can guide you through it, but that's what you're looking at. This is what Autodesk primarily says to use. There's a couple of other options we can try, but that's usually what I recommend first, is the flatten objects. If you're running AutoCAD LT, there is no way to do it easily in AutoCAD LT. We would need to write a script for that. I know there's a couple of scripts online that should flatten everything close to layer equals 0. Or sorry, Z elevation of 0. There's link to pasta. Yep, Lori took care of that. Is there a way to go to the classic insert box? Oh yeah, you like classic insert? Type in classic insert, brings you back to the classic insert box. Okay. The other thing you can do is you can go, if you have Express tools, you can come up here to your alias editor. Command alias is here, because I love this. And you'll see that I have I currently set here to insert. I can edit this and I can change my I from insert to classic insert. Select that, hit OK. Answer yes through the prompts. And now you'll see when I just hit the letter I, whoops, I still have that box open. Okay, now when I just hit the letter I for insert, it brings up my classic insert box as opposed to my block palette. I understand why you're asking for that, Perry. I generally still use the classic insert box. Can you speak real quick on the dangers of copy and paste or drag and drop data into your drawings? Yes, Kelly, I can. The biggest problem I have, or the biggest concern I have when you copy and paste from other drawings or you drag and drop data from other drawings into your current drawing, is you don't know if the other drawing has issues. Okay, I covered part of this in I think it was my January webinar where I talked about how to keep drawings clean with the minus purge, reg apps, things like that. So some of the things that you need to be very concerned about is that if you're copying and pasting or dragging and dropping data from other drawings that you don't know where they're from, or other drawings that have had issues, you may be bringing those issues into your own drawings. I am a big stickler for, if you need something, create a block out of it, make sure you take everything out of it. Basically purge, clean, do everything you can to make that block from one drawing as minimal and as error-free as possible, and then you insert it. Oh, let's see. More specifically, how to set up AutoCAD's graphic settings to manage point cloud data. What can you do with point cloud data in AutoCAD? All right, Tim, we can talk a little bit about point clouds, but really what you're going to be looking for is down here in the O snaps. You can actually, if we go back to our OSNAP settings here, you're going to see that you have a 3D object snap. So this is one of the things you're going to have to turn on, and you're going to see you have a bunch of OSNAPs here as they specifically relate only to point clouds. The reality is point clouds are nothing more than a fancy XREF that has data points in it. There's not a whole lot you can do to manipulate them. Actually, you can't manipulate the point clouds directly in AutoCAD. They essentially behave and act as an XREF. So you can't really modify anything on the point cloud. That's something you'd need a program called Recap, or use one of the other programs that are out there for point cloud editing. But this will allow you to snap between nodes. Again, your 3D snap is on. I can bring in a point cloud and I can draw lines between those points with the node on, because it does pick up all of those as nodes. Hopefully that gets you in the ballpark. Say you've wanted to make the layers drop down wider, you've added it to the quick access toolbar and can make that window wider, but the text, the layer names, doesn't expand to the box size. And I assume you are talking about this box right here, Cliff. This one right here, you can't make it any wider. Okay. We'll talk about, yep, we will get there. So this box right here is set in your QE, right? We talked about your QE editor. Type in CUI, it brings this up here. We have to go down into ribbon. We have to go down in panels. We have to go down into home layers here, right? This is your layers panel. When we click on this object, you'll see minimum width and maximum width is here. You'll see that it's set NAN. Now the question is, we can set your minimum width if we go and hit OK. There you go. That's how you fix that. See, now it's 500. Again, I went into QE. You go down to ribbon. You go down to panels, because this is your layer panel. We are in home, so you have to go down here to home. You have to find your layers. You click on the element here and you change this. Right, I'm going to change mine back to the default of 208, but that's how you do that. Layer names don't fill the box, so you've made that. That might be, that's going to be more of a separate one. We might have to take that one offline, Cliff. I'm going to have to investigate that a little further, because normally that's all I've had to do. All right, so let's see, where are we at? Specifically, manage point cloud data, want to make the layers. Is it common to put points on layer 0 so they never print? No, you'd really want to put them on a def points, or you'd want to go into your layer properties here, create a new layer, right? We can call it layer 1. And one of the things you'll see here is plot. If I check this so that you've got the little red circle here, anything on layer 1 will not plot. Normally, I recommend this for viewports, that you have a viewports layer or you have a no plot layer, and everything that you want in your drawing for construction purposes, construction lines, etc. you put on those layers, because they won't print. Let's see. Have you ever done a webinar, have resources on the geolocation commands in AutoCAD LT? It appears from the command that an external GPS receiver can be used. We have not done anything with the geolocation commands other than to show people how to use it. I have not, the commands from an external GPS receiver can be used. I am not aware that that is the case, but that doesn't mean that it can't be done. I have just not run into that. Within a block used as visible and hidden in the same drawing, should I set the colors, line types inside this block as by layer or by block so that I can use the same block twice but show it with the same 2 colors and line types? Erlinda, okay. This was an excellent. What I always tell people, unless you have a specific need, is to draw the blocks to always be color by layer, line type by layer. Okay, and always draw them on layer 0. The reason why is that if the block definition is on layer 0 and it's line type by layer and color by layer, whatever layer you put it on will inherit those properties. If you set it to by block or you set it to a specific layer, it will never inherit the properties of the layer it's on. How do you set data links to auto update? They normally should auto update, but if it's prompting you to update, that usually means that you're either running into the plot where it wants to auto update prior to plotting, or say, I'm trying to think about that, because the data links normally propagate whenever you save, or not save, whenever you open the drawing after it's been closed. But if the drawing's been modified, then you do have to go back and force an update. Okay, Tina. Currently working with Civil 3D 2020. Is there a way to right or left align the aligned dimension style that is set to horizontal alignment? That's a Civil 3D question. That's not what this is covering. We're covering just basic AutoCAD. Tina, I think I have dealt with you before. We can come back and talk about that. Is there a way to export block attributes to Excel? Yes, I covered that. Data extraction wizard, where you can extract data and you can either extract it to a table within your AutoCAD, or you can turn around, and that was in a previous webinar. I believe that was January or November's webinar or January's of this year, or January or February's, where I talked about the data extraction wizard, right? There's data extraction wizard. Where did I find that? This is one of those things that I don't use very often. Right, when you bar set that to 1, tools, data extraction, right? You must save the drawing, etc. But the data extraction wizard under tools, this is where I know how to find it easily. Data extraction will allow you to go through, find the blocks in your drawing. You can export specific information and or export the attributes of the blocks themselves. Shannon, you've used both Ole and Data Link, and what are the pros and cons? With the data link, it is dynamic back to the spreadsheet. So if you change the spreadsheet next time you update the data link, or you reopen the drawing after it's been closed, the data should automatically update. With Ole, it's a static object. The other thing you're going to find out with Ole objects is that the more you put in your drawing, the slower your drawing gets, because it's an embedded image. Sometimes as well, especially with the new 2021, if you double click to modify an Ole object, you modify it and you put it back, it may shift and or rescale itself. And then once you've rescaled it back and moved it back, it generally is okay. How does the project command differ from the flatten? You're talking about the project command, differ from flatten. Flatten is to flatten everything out to 0. Flat shot is to grab all 3D objects and create 2D blocks from 3D objects, and the project command allows you to project into a different Z elevation. Let's see, when I attach the JPEG in model space, then it does not show up in the window on the paper space. When I try and attach a JPEG in model space, all right. Okay, that could be any number of things, Robert, but what I would generally look at is if you are in paper space, if you know the layer, right, here's my viewport, you'll see here that if I double click in here and I go back to my layers, one of the things to be very careful of is that you can turn the layer off entirely, you can freeze, you can lock the layer here, but one of the things to also be aware of is that you can freeze it in the viewport. So if I freeze layer 0 in my viewport, my objects here are gone, but if I go back to model space, they're still visible here. So it may just be something simple as the layer is frozen in the viewport, so you can't see it. All right, we're getting through this. Sometimes when I use the new XREF compare feature, it sets the XREF on a different location in the drawing. I haven't run across that specific issue, Perry, but that could be either the insertion point has been changed between one or the other XREFs, and or we may have a separate issue where the XREF compare feature may have a defect, and we would want to take a look at closer at that. Can you briefly discuss the student version of AutoCAD and the watermark that is permanently associated to those DWG files? Yes, I can. The student watermark has never actually been removed at all from any of the AutoCAD versions that had it. They briefly turned off the EDU stamp, or this was the stamp that you're talking about, the watermark. In order for you to remove it, there's a couple of utilities that are out there that can help you identify what was created with it. There's another couple of ways that sometimes will allow you to get around it. You may have to DXF the file out to an R12 DXF, which will strip all of that information, reopen the DXF after you've closed and reopened AutoCAD, and then resave it as a DWG, and that should help get rid of that watermark in a lot of cases. All right, if you are seeing the command line instead of the dialog box for commands like tcount, you need to put in CMD DIA, and that needs to be set to 1. If the CMD DIA is set to 0, anything that should pop up a dialog box is going to only appear in the command line. Let's see, things which I insert from the toolbars are not on the right layer. How do I change layer? Are you talking toolbars up here, or are you talking a tool palette, right? You have a tool palette over here, right? So if I'm inserting, let's say this door Imperial, it will insert on the current layer I'm on, unless I go in here and I go to properties, and I covered tool palettes also in a previous one, and you can actually tell this to go on a specific layer where it's set to use current. If this is set to an individual layer, that's the layer it will end up on. Okay, that usually covers that. All right, layer names doesn't fill the box. Yes, Cliff, I know we're gonna have to take a look at that. When I use the F1 key to get to AutoCAD help, it goes to Windows help instead if there's a fix for that. I have not seen that. That's probably because there's either a defect, either the software has a minor corruption in it, or something else is going on where the F1 is being rerouted, and that might be, especially if you're using one of the specialized keyboards like a Microsoft Office specific keyboard. The F1 help is actually launching Windows help or Office help, as opposed to the standard function keys, and sometimes that can cause that problem. So we'd have to take a deeper look at that. Okay, can I replace a block with another block without redefining it? Let's say there's a block named B1 and I want all of them to be replaced with another one, B2. Okay, yes. Command is block, replace. Right, I don't have any blocks in this particular drawing, but I can select B1 from here. I could pick it, and I click OK, and then it will ask me to grab the next one, and then all instances of B1 would be replaced by B2 without having to reinsert B2. And the QAT because I'm using classic toolbars. Okay, classic toolbars. So you are talking about, you are in this particular mode, right? just to make sure I understand where you are at. You are in this mode, correct, Cliff? Right, where you can make this box bigger and it's not changing, or it's not giving you the full names, it's still truncating them at a certain area, correct? Let's see if I can get down to Cliff. Yep. So in the classic interface, that may be set. My suggestion is that we get you into a support session and we actually take a look at that a little deeper. So let's go back up here. Is there a way to go back to the light color on the toolbars in AutoCAD 2021, or I can set the text to be brighter? So, right, you like the lighter one. Options, and we go back to dark mode, go back to light mode. That should set everybody back to right. That's the light color for the toolbars, but you have to go with light and dark theme. There's no way to change that otherwise. Please, for the love of all of us, stop using def point layers to not plot items. Like I said, I always say to make a no plot layer. Def points only ever is created in your drawing if you add dimensions, because the definition points for the dimensions themselves, the little nodes at the end of the lines, are actually what creates def points. When you open a drawing, the left side window folders, and can you make the background color darker? So you are talking, when I go here, you want to make this darker. Right? There is no way to make this darker because this is getting its information from Windows somewhere. I have not found a way to make this darker or to make the text show up brighter, unfortunately. Can you change the color of the active drawing to identify which drawing is being used? All right. I'm not really sure I understand that question, Peter. Let's see, can you change the color of the active drawing to identify which drawing is being used, right? So you'll see here, I like the tabs up here, and you'll see that the tabs themselves, when I click on this one, do have a slight highlight, so it does show me which one I'm actually in, but I'm not sure what exactly you're asking, Peter, so I would have to see that. Can't see any questions. Unrexed FREF, so if you have unreferenced XREFs from a file list, there's a couple of things. If detached does not light up, okay, what that usually means, Rob, is that you are dealing with an XREF that is nested inside another XREF or has multiple instances. So what you may need to do is you may need to go through QSelect in Model and every paper space layout and see if that XREF exists in there. The other thing to do is make sure you purge all the blocks out of your drawing, because that XREF might be part of another block. So those are the things that I usually do to get rid of unXreferenced files. If detached does not light up, can you plot sheet layouts without opening? Yes, I can plot sheet layouts without opening up the file. The only way I can do that is you've got two methods. If you have those sheets in a sheet set manager, you can open up the sheet set manager and actually plot. I've covered that. Where did my, right? The other way to do is you can go to publish. I bring up my publish box and you'll see that I have all my open drawings in here. I can also turn around. So let's say I can go here and remove them all. I can also come in here and I can add a drawing here, and I can go find a different drawing from somewhere. So I can go into my customer standards, old, right? So we can go, let's say here, I'm going to open up this drawing. Now, mind you, I haven't actually opened up this drawing, but then I can go through here and select all of these sheets in here, and I can print them that way. Whew, we're just motoring right along. All right, can you change the insertion point of a block after it has been created and is already in your templates? Yes. First thing you're going to have to do is you are going to have to come back into, right? We've got to go, let me insert a block here real quick, or we're going to need to just create one. All right, we'll create one right here. I'll go Control C, Control Shift V. All right, there's block. All right, so first thing I've got to do, you're going to see this is the insertion point of this block. I need to go block editor here. I need to go here. And one of the things that you're going to see in here when I go to my properties is I'm going to be able to see some of this information. And what I can change is I can change, because I just went in this INS base, and we want that to be 0, 0, 0. Right? And so if I go to line 0, 0, 0, it's right there. That's my insertion base. So that's where it is determining that. If I've got this incorrect, I can change that with INS base, which changed my insertion base, and I can change that to a different location. So this is where it would normally be inserting here, right? If I change my insertion base to, let's say, right here, this is my insertion point, right? I'm going to save my changes. Now you're going to see, right? This still shows the insertion point here. So now I have to do, and I covered this with the blocks where we have in a previous webinar where we have to do sync. There's a, what is that? Block update, right? But that's what it normally changes. INS base, that should do that. Let's see, changing this. Okay, difference between units, DD units, and -DWG units. So units brings up our units dialog here, right? DD units brings up the same block or same box because it's just how the command is written. DD units is the same as units, and minus DWG units is essentially the same thing. You're just doing it only through the command line. All right. Annotation dimensions used all AutoCAD software. It's a style setting I cannot figure out. Sorry for, okay. Image frame is set to 0, printed to PDF. Frame does not show in PDF, but prints in a string of drawings. Any ideas? That might be a technical issue there. Image frame is set to 0. It should not normally print, but if it's printing in your drawings, we may need to look at something there. What's the difference between on and freeze and layer options? All right, I covered this one. No, I have not covered this one. The difference is if you turn something on or off, all you're doing is removing it from your display. I can still select objects on a layer that's turned off. If I freeze a layer, freeze essentially turns the layer off and then locks it. So I cannot select the objects on a frozen layer, even through list commands, things like that. QSelect won't select anything on a frozen layer. So freeze essentially is an off and a lock together. In signing and design and AutoCAD. Dan, I believe you're talking about adding a digital signature. And if you are, honestly, it really doesn't matter to me. I have not had any specific reason to sign anything unless a jurisdiction specifically asked for it. In that case, I do create a digital signature, just a local digital signature, and then create, plot the PDFs or attach it. But normally I go about avoiding it. Let's see, does base change the insertion point on a drawing when you XREF it? Yes, it will change that information, Perry. Is there now a scale all feature for scaling all blocks from 1/4 inch to 1/8 inch scale? Let's see. Wow, and we're at 10 o'clock, Lori.
Yes, I know. I didn't want to cut you off.
Oh, wow.
If you
Base
can just,
point.
is it okay? I'm not sure how many more you have to go because I'm going through all of them myself.
Yeah, so base point and INS base are different and you'd want to set them both. Okay. Still can't get a command, still get command line and not a dialog box on T count command. Andrew, we would probably have to take a look at that. T count should normally, if it's not bringing up a dialog box, it may not have one associated to it, or you may be superseding it with a list that only runs in command line. That might be my guess there. Dialog box works fine in 2020, not in 2021. Again, that we may need to look at that specifically. And we still have some questions that did not get answered. I've written a whole bunch of stuff down that we did not get a chance to do. So we definitely have some good ammunition for not the next webinar, but the webinar following. So.
Okay, great. All right. So just before you leave, for those of you who are still with us, Ryan, of course, has got